Monday. I know some of your faces and I'm new to others, so nice to virtually meet you. Um, so, before I kind of get started into what we're talking about and the exercises that we're going to do, also, if you don't have a piece of paper, I recommend getting one, or you could just use your phone, just something to write down, like in your notes section, but something to just jot some stuff down. But before we get into that, I just want to give you guys a brief background about me and about what kind of led me to the conversation that we're going to be talking about today. So, my name is Alex. I am a holistic chiropractor and the founder of Spiriosity. And I really started my spiritual journey, fascination in college when I actually double majored in psychology and the academic study of religion. So I've always been fascinated with what I call the human experience. Some people will call it wellness, and I don't love the word wellness, but it's in that similar vein. And so, how we understand ourselves, the world around us, feeling good, and that comprehensive internalization of the experience that we have on this earth, that we have in our bodies, that we have with other people, that we have with nature. And so I use that term, the human experience, and you'll hear me use it a lot throughout this. And so my interest in that initially led me towards understanding the mental and spiritual facets that influence how we have a relationship with ourselves and the world around us. And so, looking at that from a psychological lens, from a school and academic perspective, and then also looking at that from a religious lens. So, and when I say the academic study of religion, if you're not familiar, that is different than theology. So that's not looking at a text from a point of verbatim truth. It's looking at how religion functions as a tool in society to influence politics, influence philosophy, influence power structures, and a more zoomed out perspective. And so when I started studying religion, I was super, super fascinated with, the overlap of what did Judaism have to say about things that Christianity had to say about that had Buddhism had things to say, how, where did they blend? And I was raised Catholic. I identified with that kind of mindlessly for a while. I kind of ricocheted in like high school, early college into that atheist, like, oh, religion is just a mechanism for people who can't process things, and kind of rebelled against my Catholic roots. And then I found the academic study of religion and kind of sorted my own spirituality through that. And so, the term agnostic, somewhere between like super religious and super atheist. Someone's agnostic in the middle there. They believe in some sort of power, but don't really want to use certain terminology to talk about it, or they might not be comfortable with the word God, something like that. So then I fell into that agnostic category. And over time, my spirituality has just built on to the point to where, I mean, that's all I read about. That's all I want to talk about all the time. And in that sort of process, and after I graduated from school, I was interested in the physical component of the human experience. So on top of religion, spirit, psychology, mental, I was like, okay, there's another piece to this. There's a physical component, a physical body health component, which propelled me into getting my doctorate in chiropractic. And I treat here in Los Angeles, in Marina Del Rey. I saw some of you guys were local to LA. Um, and I work in an integrative facility. So I work with other physicians, I work with physical therapists, acupuncturists, Pilates instructors. And I was seeing a bunch of patients and helping them with their physical needs. And I kind of noticed that people didn't really want to talk about the mental and the spiritual variables that might be influencing their physical pain. When you're in a medical facility, it's not necessarily a safe space to be like, oh, well, I'm having trouble with my daughter who might be contributing to this persistent pain in my neck. And so that lack of safe space in the medical community for that spiritual and psychological conversation really sparked me to kind of create a platform that was a safe space to explore these kind of things and see how the mental and the spiritual and the physical all actually coalesce into one giant picture of health, of wellness, of the human experience. So that's a little bit about me. And if you haven't heard of Spiriosity, it is a community for this the curious spirit to explore all the things that I just mentioned, all things religious, spiritual, philosophical, psychological, and we'll get started with that. So, whenever you talk about spirituality and religion, it's super triggering for a lot of people. Like those are words that carry a lot of weight. So, the first thing to do is to unlock the subconscious biases that we have around religion and spirituality. So, for me, as I mentioned, I was raised Catholic, right? So, my platform that I understand the world through is very much from an American Christian paradigm. I was raised a certain way. That's, whether I agree with it or not, those belief systems are inherently inside of me. And they say, it's it's taboo to talk about religion and politics at the dinner table. And I'm here to the birth of Spiriosity was to disrupt that notion, say, well, no, it's not. If you add some intentionality behind that conversation, why aren't we talking about religion? Why aren't we talking about our own biases? Why aren't we talking about the disparity from the religious and spiritual identification that we were raised with and the spiritual or religious identification that we resonate with currently? And what happened? What caused that shift? Do I feel the same way about a higher power than the way I was raised? Do I feel differently? And what influences have shaped my journey of my spiritual identification? And you have to speak, as I use the term beginner's mind, you have to speak about this very, very intentionally and very much from a place where there is not a wrong answer. And so you have to recognize your own biases, and you have to recognize that other people also have their biases. And that helps facilitate more of a safe space and more of a space where we can understand the nuances of why people believe certain things and why they don't believe other things. So we're going to do a quick little exercise to explore this. So if you have your pen and paper, so the first thing I want you to write down are what words come up when I hear the word spirituality. So I'll give you like 1 minute. Time this. Good. Couple more seconds. Anything that comes to mind, just stream of consciousness when you hear the word spirituality. Okay, so next, we're going to do the same thing. Your second list. What words come up when I hear the word religion? Okay, so now you have your two lists. So now I want you to look at all of your words, and any word that feels on the seesaw of positive, negative, that feels positive, I want you to circle those words. Now, any words that feel on the seesaw of positive, negative, that lean towards negative, I want you to underline those words. Okay, so now I want you to share in the chat what words came up that were positive that were in your spirituality list. Connection, mindfulness, discovery, self-questioning, morning, prayer. I like morning. Morning is so spiritual to me. Freedom, truth, love, out of the box, love, unity, open mind, connection, wholeness, nature, woo woo, love again, cleansing, crystals, spirits, eternal, quiet, practice. Yes. Okay, so now what words came up in the list of religion that were also positive? Community, culture, family, organized, traditions, traditions again, belief, foundational, prayer, icons, rituals, communion, belonging, family, scripture. Physical church building. Okay, now what words came up that were around spirituality that were negative? Bypass, yeah, spiritual bypassing. I'm not surprised. I actually didn't have negative in either column. Same. Okay, good, good. Misconception. I didn't have any negatives here either. Okay, okay. Chanting, interesting. Yeah, that chanting is on the negative side. Yeah, woo woo could go both ways. You could lean in, or that can make people lean out. Okay, what about negative for religion? War, yeah. Restriction, programming, rigid, I like that word, controlling, manipulative, formulaic, discrimination, tribal, yeah. Standards, lack of questioning, money, yeah, that's interesting. Also interesting, money associated with negative. Restriction, stuck, hypocrisy, regimented, yeah. So if we just look regimented, saints, the Bible, Jesus, formality, priests, bad, good, yes, yeah, that dichotomy, like heaven, hell, good, bad. Okay, interesting. My brain didn't go there right away. So if we're talking about our own biases, you can already tell that as a collective here, we all have a little bit of a bias with a more negative collective energy towards religion than spirituality. If you just look at that difference based off of the group, and obviously this is going to change on an individualistic basis. Everyone had their own lists, but if you just look from a general sense, the contribution toward the negative column within the religion category held more weight than it did in the spiritual category. So that's just a general recognition of our own internal and our own collective biases around this type of language. Okay. Okay, so next, spiritual archetypes. So really I have a little visual for this in a bit, but it seems that, and I use the word dichotomous already, but it seems that there's a dichotomy, right? There's religion X and there's spirituality Y. And it's very black and white. It's very polarized. And the spiritual archetypes are a way to help bridge that gap and tap into the nuances in between those two poles of connecting with the divine, religion and spirituality. So before we get into that, based off of your lists that you just made, what the first I have two questions, and you can say these in the chat. What makes religion different from spirituality? What's the difference after you looked at your two lists? Organization, formality, rules. Yeah, general structure. Religion equals community, spirituality equals self. That's interesting. Mandated structure versus choice, structure versus choice. Religion is more concrete. Yeah, it's like religion almost feels like it has that masculine energy in terms, if you think about divine polarity in that way, that like it's like a container. Structure, spiritual is much more personal. Spirituality feels more personal and individual. Religion feels like it dictates norms for all. I associate religion with bad, good, or punishment. Super specific. Homeschooling versus public school. Oh, interesting. Homeschooling versus public school. Okay, so what makes spirituality and religion the same? Is the next question. Connection to higher power, something beyond ourselves, study of self, human experience, faith in something. I like that word. Belief. I like that word. Greater power, connecting to higher power, beyond ourselves. Yeah. Yes. Agree. So there's that Venn diagram, right? There's religion in a category, there's spirituality in a category, and there is that loose overlap between the two. And so we're going to get a little bit more into that now with the spiritual archetypes. So the first spiritual archetype is religious. So if you are a religious archetype, you have devoted your time and soul to following an organized path of righteousness. You're proud of your faith as it is strong and it has been carefully cultivated. You likely have a community with whom you share your spiritual practices with. You may struggle connecting with different belief systems, sacred texts. So the first archetype that is a religious archetype within these shades of gray that we're talking about. And if you identify with this archetype, you're likely loyal, motivated, what I call a doer, straightforward, and sensible. So these are virtues that you carry with you and that individuals carry with them if they operate from this archetype. So you can be this archetype as an individual. So for example, my grandma is a religious archetype, right? She's Roman Catholic. I have a saint in my car because she sent me a saint to bless my car. I have a rosary blessed by the Pope in Italy, literally like next to me. And she's, with COVID, she's at church on the TV every Sunday, every Wednesday. She fits this archetype. She's high in loyalty, she's straightforward, she's sensible. And that's an example of someone fitting this archetype on an individual level. But these archetypes also apply to collective entities. So if you think about Israel, okay, Israel as a country, as a collective community, also is a religious archetype. So despite Israel having sacred spaces for Christianity and for Islam, it openly identifies with Judaism. I mean, the Jewish stars on their flag. If you guys don't know about birthright, if you're Jewish and you're born outside of Israel, outside of the promised land, it's literally been deemed your birthright. That's the phrase of the program, to earn a trip back to Israel, to the promised land. And so that collective entity fits in the archetype of the religious archetype. So it's important to understand that these archetypes can operate on an individual level. They can operate on a medium level, like a family or like a small group, and also on a bigger perspective, like an entire country. And it's important to understand these archetypes because this is how you have the tough conversation of interacting with the different archetypes. So knowing your own archetype and knowing the collective archetypes. The next archetype is secular. So if you're a secular spirit, you find sacred moments in your everyday routines. Though you might not notice, your personal rituals subtly tickle your soul throughout your day. Whether it's your skincare routine, moments with your pet, or connecting with nature, you find intermittent moments of transcendence, perhaps without realization. Spiritual terminology. So, a secular spirit, an individual example of this is my mom. So you guys might identify as secular spirits. You might know someone, but my mom is, we have a swing in our backyard at home. She goes on her swing every single day before dinner, before the sun sets. It's her moment, peace and nature. And my mom doesn't identify with a certain religion. I mean, she recognizes, again, I was raised Catholic, so there's that loose Christian background, but she recognizes a higher power, but she's not out there like, I'm going to go cherish my moment with nature in the trees. It's a little bit deeper in there. So it's something that doesn't seem so explicit. Like if you think about Israel identifying with Judaism, it's very overt, it's very explicit. A secular spirit, it might be a little bit more subconscious. It might be someone who has their skincare routine down every single night. Subconsciously, on some level, that is a devotion to themselves, to their body, to their physical vessel. It's a form of ritual for them. This might be lighting a candle before you go to bed. This might be playing a certain playlist to hype you up before you do something. That brings you in connection with whatever that higher power is, whatever that transcendent feeling is. And this is can be anything. Anything can be spiritual if you give it the weight that it carries. And these are just much more non-traditional spiritual forms of expression. And so a country, how I gave Israel for the last example, a collective energy, a collective entity that steps into the secular archetype is the United States. So although we have separation of church and state, I know we say pledge allegiance under God, and I know we have in God we trust on our money. There is a religious undertone there, but we don't wear our primary identification as Christianity. We wear and this is an argument that I make and it's up for interpretation, but I would argue that the United States of America's secular spirit archetype manifests in terms of nationalism, in terms of the patriotism, their patriotic duty, the flag, the troops, the military, our high emphasis on defense. Our pride in our country is the spirituality of the secular archetype of the United States of America. And so you see how that form of spiritual expression is very different than a religious archetype. And I'm going to check the chat really quick. Oh, birthright. Yeah. Okay. So the last archetype is solar. So, I don't think I actually. Can I go back? Okay, well, I'll just tell you from here. So I gave you some of the virtues for the religious archetype. For the secular archetype, the virtues are diligent, disciplined, goal-oriented, reliable, and steady. So think about someone that fits that secular archetype in your brain. Maybe it's a family member or a friend, and think about those virtues of diligence, discipline, goal oriented, reliability, and steadfast. And the last spiritual archetype is solar. So a solar spirit. So if you're a solar spirit, you know the power that the universe holds and its infinite intelligence. You're aware that there exists a oneness that unites all of humanity, all living things. Your soul has an inkling of the cosmic energy that lies underneath all religious belief. Your curiosity and exploratory mind has helped you along the way. You may struggle finding a community to share the nuances of your spiritual ideals. So, I identify as a solar archetype. Excuse me. I do things like meditate. I have crystal. I literally have my crystals. Where are they? Here's one around me. Before I started this, I have my candles lit, my objects of meaning. I pull from like an a la carte menu of religious belief. Like I pray to Saint Anthony when I lose something. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that Catholic tradition, but I pull that. But I also check in with my chakras. I'm working on my heart chakra right now, and so I take what I like and what I don't like from the giant platter of all religion and spiritual ideology, and that's kind of an example of an individualized solar spirit. So you might not use the word God, you might use the word universe, whereas a secular archetype that we just talked about might not be comfortable asking the universe for something. That might seem a little bit woo to them. But someone that was a solar archetype, that might feel right, that might feel aligned, whereas a solar archetype might really not feel connected to asking God for something. And these are fluid archetypes. They're not, set in stone, but they're general structures that flow into one another. And so, as a collective entity example, I use Bali, and Bali is an island off of Indonesia. So it's not its own complete country, but it's under the democracy of Indonesia. I use Bali as an example, and I also use the indigenous cultures of the Amazon as an example of secular archetypes in a communal way. So here, when you go to Bali, you can very easily just find a spiritual healer. And you think about eat, pray, love, like it's so normalized. Whereas in the US, it's like, what? Like, what are you doing? And in Israel, they'd be like, what again? What are you doing? And so in the Amazon, they have openly open ability to talk about plant medicine. They have indigenous cultures that are still robust, that are still very normalized to be talked about and to be discussed. And so if you think about that level of normalcy and what feels right for those collective energies, Bali and the Amazon are two places geographically where the solar archetype really is manifested. And the qualities for the solar archetype are self-aware, you have a curious mind, non-conforming, introspective, and a dreamer. So if you identify with the solar archetype, or you think that you know someone, think about them in those terms, about them maybe daydreaming, them asking a lot of questions, them non-conforming, and kind of forging their beat. What's the phrase? They dance to the beat of their own drum, that kind of thing. Let's check the chat. Yes, the healing in Peru. It fascinates me as a holistic just like how they're so with the earth and the medicine of the earth. Okay, so here you have the spectrum. All the way to the right, you have religious, and all the way to the left, you have spirituality. So we talked about this dichotomy a little bit. And we're all the way to the right in our biases in the beginning. We have structure, we have rigidity, we have rules, we have condemnation. And all the way to the left with the spirituality, we have woo woo and spiritual bypassing and spiritual performance and very egocentric la la land kind of energy on this end of the spectrum. And again, those are kind of the two negative biases on both of them. And in a positive way, we have with religion, we have structure, we have foundation, we have tradition. There's antiquity in that, and there's power in that tradition. And with spirituality, we have a sense of independence, and we have fluidity, and we have like new crevices to explore, and maybe a sense of autonomy and independence in how we identify spiritually. And spiriosity, as I mentioned, is trying to bridge this gap. I want to help it shed light on these shades of gray in between this seemingly dichotomous, so polarized spectrum of religious identification. Like, you are allowed to identify with certain principles of Buddhism and not be a Buddhist. And I mean, at the other end of the spectrum, you'll meet people and they'll be like, I'm a Buddhist. And I'm like, do you know, are you a Buddhist? Like, Buddhists are celibate typically, and Buddhists don't drink alcohol, and, you know, and we don't have to confine ourselves to just be one religion. I'm giving you permission to openly explore and identify what you like about Buddhism, what you like about Islam, what you like about Hinduism. So many of the gods, or goddesses rather, are female, and which is very, very different from if you're used to Judaism, Islam, or Christianity, which all the gods are male. And so just from a power standpoint and an energy structure, seeing a female in power from the actual goddesses. And if you look at the culture of India, where Hinduism is super pervasive, you'll see that trickle down effect of that perception of women, because they actually bow down to female goddesses. So you can take that, you can take the chakra system. The chakra system is actually rooted in Hinduism. You can take the prayer from Saint Anthony when you lose something, and it works every time, I promise you, and create this archetype for yourself, and freely identify as your most spiritual self. There's no limit on that. And creating a community around others that are interested in expanding their own spiritual identification, spiritual expression, is really important, especially right now with all the access that we have with technology, with, just being social distancing and feeling that like lack of physical connection. Feeling spiritually connected is really important personally, but doing so, it can be lonely and it can be scary, because there are so many rules, or people seem not grounded enough, or people might seem too caught up in the rules. So finding that safe space to talk about this, and giving yourself permission to explore, is super important in mitigating, this disparity between one spectrum and the other. So the least common denominator, I try to make this word not so mathematic, but it's the best term that I use when talking about this kind of stuff, because at the end of the day, what I want to do is break down all of these different religions and spiritual ideologies to what is the essence that each of these are trying to get to, that they all come back to the same thing. And I break this down into 3 different components. 1 are rituals, 2 are objects of meaning, and 3 are virtues. And so I want to have a little quiz with you here. So for the religious archetype, what's an example of a ritual that a religious archetype might engage in? Communion, yeah. So the one I always say is the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Like, if I ever pray, that I do with that, because that's like, I went Catholic school my whole life. Observing Shabbat, yes. Confession, yes. So it's ingrained in this culture. Okay, so what's an object of meaning in a religious archetype? So an example I'm going to give: rosary. Something, a cross, yes. The Torah, yes. Cedar plate, Bible, yes. And then what is a virtue that a religious archetype might identify with? Humbleness, yep. Humility, truth, honesty. service, giving back. Forgiveness is big because we said confession. Yes. Okay. So now for care and kindness. For a secular archetype, the second one. What's a ritual that they might engage with? Again, there's no wrong answers. I'm just trying to help you internalize this a little bit deeper. So a secular archetype, a ritual. So a ritual would say, yes, washing their face, making their bed every morning. Such a good example. Walking in sunshine. Yes. Going on a hike. Yes. Taking a bath. Yes. Seems so every day, but it's ritualized. Hmm. What about an object of meaning? So this is controversial, I guess, for lack of a better word. And I had this on one as one of my thought starters. Yes, slippers, cup of coffee, candles. Yes, yes, you guys are getting it. Family heirloom, a Horcrux, crystals. Yes, I could go either way, secular or solar. But so I have this theory that adult water bottles. I have my Yeti right there. Are really just a semblance of or a recreation of a safety blanket as a child, and that's a ritual. Like, I have to have my water bottle anywhere I go, and that's like that's my anchor, that's my grounding mechanism. And so that's very secular, it's very everyday, it's very, that doesn't seem spiritual to have your water bottle, but you're nourishing your body. You have a totem that is yours that you can carry around with you, and it's literally fueling your physical vessel and helping you feel better. Okay, and what's a virtue for a secular spirit? Independence, yep. Hardworking, freedom, yeah, freedom, yes, big. Flexible, openness, yes, exactly. And then solar spirit. So the last one, the solar, the universe, the cosmic intelligence. What is an example of a ritual that they might engage with? Meditation, yes. Sound bath, affirmations, Mm-hmm. Exactly. Spells, making moon water, yes. Yoni steaming, chanting, new moon rituals, yoga, yep. Oracle cards, yes. Okay, what's object of meaning? It's 444, by the way, so perfect that we're on solar. Tarot cards, crystal, altar, yes. Card deck, crystals, cards, 444, yes. Numerology, yep. And then what would be a virtue of a solar spirit? Awareness, yep. Openness, intuition, oh yeah. I can't say that. Universality, yes. Creativity. I like interconnectedness, like all things are together, that oneness. Yes, oneness, exactly. Exactly. Okay. So I just want to kind of end this discussion with some thought starters. And if you follow Spiriosity and not much of an opportunity to expand on them because it's just in a general poll. But we're going to be able to do that here. So the first thing I want to ask you, and again in the chat, do all religions and spiritual practices aim to teach the same truths? So I'll ask again, do all religious and spiritual teachings, ideologies, do they aim to teach the same truth? So on a poll, it would just be a general yes or no. You don't have to explain yourself. So it's open. Yes, it is open to your own interpretation. There's no wrong answers. Yes, the same ends, but not the same means. No, yes, right? A section of our wedding. Is Buddhism a religion? Yes, Buddhism is a religion. So as an example, I've had discussions with some people about this just in the polls and in the DMs of Spiriosity when I ask this. And so I'm reading a book right now that's comparing the seven sacraments of of Catholicism, like baptism, confirmation, all that, the tree of life in Judaism, and the seven chakra systems. And she argues that all these religious and spiritual teachings aim to teach the same truths and to honor yourself, honor your neighbor, and honor your family. Buddhism can also be a philosophy, but Buddhism is also, I guess that's hard to answer definitively. Some say it's philosophy and others say it's a religion. I guess that comes down to your definition of religion or philosophy. But these are just, again, just questions to get you thinking. So if you say yes, why do you say yes? And what truths are these religions and spiritual practices trying to teach us? And if you say no, that's okay too. What are the opposing truths that they aren't trying to teach us? And so personally, I lean towards yes, because I think that at the end of the day, they all come back to the essence of love. And that's my personal opinion. There's literally not a right answer. This is a general discussion. But these are things that I want you to be thinking about, especially as you're trying to expand your own spirituality. And once you have your own spiritual identification, being able to communicate with someone that has a different spiritual identification as you. So if you're a solar spirit and you're talking to a religious spirit, and you don't think that their ideology is trying to teach the same truths as your ideology, what's the difference? And can you find common ground there? Can you find at least common denominator there? And the last thought starter question I want to ask you guys is, how does religion and spirituality coincide with the concept of health? So this is not a yes or no question, which I'm taking advantage of because this is not a poll. You can actually type it out. So how do religion and spirituality coincide with the concept of health? If everything is energy, all things are connected to our physical bodies. Yes. Yes. So I would even argue, and I argue this to my patients, that having a sense of awareness is spiritual. Because if I ask you, if you're my patient, and I ask you, oh, I have low back pain, and I ask you what makes it better and what makes it worse, and you can't answer that question, you are lacking a spiritual connectedness to your pain. You are lacking the awareness of what exacerbates your pain and what alleviates your pain. You have to spiritually tap into your physical body to know what makes your pain worse and to what makes it better in order for you to be an active participant in your healing process. And healing only happens when you are an active participant in the process. And in order to be an active participant, you have to tap into some spiritual and religious virtues. You know how I broke it down to objects of meaning, rituals, and virtues? You can use those three constructs to pull from spiritual and religious ideas and apply them to your health, to your physical health. So the virtue of awareness, the ritual of exercise, things like that. Okay, and that is what I have for you, and open for any questions.
Thank you so much. That was so interesting. I kept feeling like when you were going through the different ones, I was like, oh yeah, that's me. And I was like, oh no, wait, there's so much more to think about. And you are the best at thought starting. If you guys don't follow Spiriosity on Instagram, definitely do. It's just that, Spiriosity on Instagram. And there's always thought starters on there. But Allison, I saw you have a question.
Yeah, I was just curious. I am not in the LA area, and so I can't, like be a client in person. But I know you have a podcast.
Mhm.
What are like ways that we like, do you host events, or how can we like continue knowing about you?
Yes. So I'm actually in a transitional phase of my event hosting. And so I was bringing on multiple speakers in the spiritual space to kind of share their stories. And I'm actually shifting starting in March to where there's going to be 3 to 5 thought starters on the table, and where we have a roundtable discussion, and they're going to be more intimate because I want everyone participating, video and audio, where we actually thread out these thought starters and kind of connect with each other more intimately. So for example, is it easier to love or hate? And actually elaborating on that. And the virtue of those kind of congregations is going to be participation. I argue that participation is spiritual. You have to feel communal. You have to actively participate, kind of like how I said with being an active component in your healing. So for this month, everything is on pause that was on the docket, which is on spiriosity.com, and also my newsletter, which you can find on spiriosity.com as well. You can just subscribe there, but we're starting back up again next month, and it will be more participation based.
Cool. That's so unique. There's a couple questions in the chat. I'll read them. Jamie said, what is a few first steps if your patients don't connect to their bodies?
Okay, so I have a general protocol that I give my patients, but the beginning phases are what feels good and what doesn't feel good. So in general, that could be positions, because it depends what the ailment is, right? Like, are you having headaches? Are you constipated? And that's a different conversation than my back hurts or my knee hurts. Like, are we looking at this from a biomechanical structure, which is like the shape and alignment of your joints and muscles? Or are we looking at this from a physiological standpoint, which is more diet, nutrition, sleep, water intake? And so what feels good? What feels bad? When does it feel good? When does it feel bad? And we talk about this in the first session. I say, go home, track when it feels good and what helped it to feel good, track what made it feel bad and what helps it to feel bad. And so a lot of the times that comes down to people that you're with, positions, activities of daily living. So maybe bending over to pick up your dog, bending over to pick up your laundry, and foods that you eat. And so we find patterns we call it the bios in diet and lifestyle, how you're moving your body, and who you're interacting with, and how that affects your inflammatory and fight or flight response in your nervous system. And so just a general journal prompt: what feels good, what feels bad, what makes it feel good, what makes it feel bad, what time of day affects it, and what am I doing in terms of putting into my body or physically with my body when I feel good or when I feel bad.
Amazing. Harley wants to know where you practice out of.
So I have my own office in a physical therapy clinic. It's called Blake Physical Therapy, and in Marina Del Rey. It's off of Lincoln. There's one in Santa Monica too. But I'm like my own little entity within that integrative facility.
Cool.
So if you're in LA, you should come see me.
Yeah.
Oh yes, amazing.
Any other questions or comments or concerns?
I have
Yeah,
a comment.
scoliosis. Go for it.
Okay, so I just wanted to say how powerful and important all of this is, because if you're working through like your religious and spiritual beliefs, right, we're manifesting around us all the time. So we're often manifesting proof of those beliefs that we hold.
Mm-hmm.
So getting together in a group to talk about it and like hear other people's experiences and what they're going through is super helpful and healing. And I just love what you're doing. It's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I totally agree. I mean, this has been a pain point for me for so long. I'm like, why can I only go to either church or to like syncing my period with the cycles of the moon? Like, why can't I just go and talk generally in a middle ground? Why does it have to be so like A or Z? You know, and I do want to learn things from the church, and I do want to learn things about syncing my cycle with the lunar phases, but they seem a little bit polarized. And so creating that safe space and in the middle and being able to be like, oh, maybe I want to lean into that. And then never mind, maybe I don't want to lean into that, is like having that safe space is, I agree, so powerful and important.
It's so beautiful. And like, yeah, I've just always had this idea in my mind of curiosity as a spiritual practice. And that's like what you're
Yes.
about. It's so
Yes.
cool. So yeah, thank you.
Yes, of course, of course.
Fanny. Yeah,
Yeah.
Fanny, you're not alone, girl.
And there's a lot of just shame around like, oh, this person seems so spiritually secure or so religiously secure, and I'm spiritually curious. Like when I was having my events in the beginning, I would have people identify with, are you spiritually secure? Are you spiritually confused? Or are you spiritually curious? You know? And that was like a loose kind of structure for what archetypes people thought they might be in. And I think it's important for even spiritually secure people to question why they believe what they believe in order to enhance that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Cool.
Well, thank you guys so much for listening and for joining in and for participating. I appreciate participation, like seriously, so much. You can find me on Spiriosity is my Instagram, and my personal, more chiropractic Instagram is dr.alextrevison, just my name, and they're both linked to each other. And then events, newsletter stuff is just on the website, spiriosity.com.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much for coming. This was such a good conversation, different and unique and enlightening, and lots of questioning, which I love. So I'm so glad that we were able to do this and that you came and spoke with us. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you so much. And as, of course, as always, if you have a particular amazing takeaway from this, please take a picture and tag Alex, tag Spiriosity. It goes a long way, as we know. So that's a nice way to pay it forward. And hopefully we'll look. I feel like there's a part 2 we could do to this.
Oh yeah, this is my rabbit hole of an abyss, infinite abyss.
Yeah, we'll find a date. I'm not worried. All right. Well, everyone have an amazing evening, and thank you so much for coming. And thank you, Alex. I appreciate you so much. Bye, everyone.
Monday.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.